So I was working on some stuff for this channel that will be out soon, but then I had the thought that as I play a ton of games so that I have stuff to talk about on my main channel, it might be cool to chronicle everything I play each month and put it in video form so people can hear my quick thoughts on stuff and maybe check some of these games out for themselves. Before I get started, I feel like it is worth mentioning that I 100% stole this format from Carson Runquist, who does this for movies he watches each month, so you should check his stuff out so I feel less bad for thieving. Also, I don't know that I need to mention this, but I have a cold and I am self-conscious about how I sound. And maybe I didn't sound different to you, but maybe I did. And now though, I will sound different to you because I mentioned it. So that's good. With all that, let's get started. I played a stupid amount of games in February. Like, it might be the most amount of games I've ever played in a single month, and the vast majority of them were really good. And that started with Citizen Sleeper. The thing about Citizen Sleeper is it is kind of a hard game to convince people to check out, as the actual gameplay doesn't look all that compelling, and trying to describe it arguably is even less compelling. It is a narrative-based, combatless role-playing game centered around time and resource management set in a cyberpunk world. And while that may make it seem like it would only appeal to a niche audience, I think a ton of people who might be inclined to pass on it based on that description would adore it. The comparison I'm about to make is admittedly a bad one, as Citizen Sleeper doesn't play anything like the game I'm going to mention, but throughout my time with it, I had a very similar feeling to the one I got when playing Stardew Valley for the first time. Again, these games really aren't alike at all. However, the thing they do have in common is that you can only accomplish so much during any given in-game day, but there are tons of interesting things you want to do. And there is something just so addictive about that kind of gameplay loop. I found myself continuously saying, okay, I'll just do one more cycle and then be done, until I ended up pretty much beating it in one sitting. And while it isn't a super long game, it's not all that short either, taking me about 7 hours to get through. And the wild thing is that I've talked to many other people who had the exact experience I did of not putting the game down until they beat it, which I think is a pretty good endorsement. While I think the gameplay does a good job of giving you a consistent dosage of dopamine, where it really shines is in its story and the many directions that story can go based on your decisions and success at managing your time and resources. It's a special game that I think a lot of people will miss because of how niche it seems, but I truly believe that most people would enjoy it, and it is one of the easiest recommendations I can give. Sticking with the cyberpunk theme, after Citizen Sleeper, I played Ghostrunner, which was a lot of fun. I've always been a big fan of first-person games with cool movement, stuff like Titanfall 2 and Mirror's Edge, and I think Ghostrunner takes a lot of what those titles established and raises the bar to a new level. Learning how to utilize the various movement options not only to get through the game, but to get through the game quickly is a joy. Also, it just does some stuff that I think is kind of fun, like having its upgrade system be this sort of mini game where the different moves and abilities are pretty much Tetris blocks, and you only have so much space to place them, which means you not only have to choose which abilities you think will be most valuable for your playthrough, but you also have to find a formation that allows you to maximize the amount of upgrades you have. And I can see a lot of people hating that sort of thing, but I find it really cool. All in all, it's a really fun and tight game that does try out a few experimental things that won't work for everyone, but I think are pretty cool to see. Next up, I played Maquette, which is a narrative puzzle game where the main mechanic is that there is a little model of the area you are in, and when you place an item in that model, it will show up in the actual area, but to scale. It's a cool idea that they do a fair bit with, but I never found solving the puzzles to be all that satisfying. In my experience, they were either too easy or obscure in a way that was just kind of annoying to solve. I rarely walked away from a puzzle feeling a sense of accomplishment, which I think is the opposite of what you want when playing a puzzle game. I also didn't find the story to be all that compelling. It's about the relationship of a pretty rom-com-y couple, and maybe some people will find relatability in that story, but I largely found it to be unoriginal and predictable. That doesn't make it inherently bad, it's just that it didn't do much for me, and when combined with the lackluster puzzles, I found the experience as a whole to be a bit disappointing. And while talking about games that left me feeling disappointed, that leads me to the next game I played, which was Kentucky Route Zero. By all means, I should love this game. Like, it seems made for English majors who adore video games, and while there certainly are aspects of it I found interesting, I just couldn't get into it. Since finishing it, I have watched a few videos that have gotten me to appreciate the game a bit more for both the story it tells and how it tells it, but that hasn't made me retroactively like it or anything like that. In fact, it more so has just bummed me out that instead of being moved by the game while playing it, I was mostly just bored. Where I would recommend something like Citizen Sleeper to pretty much anyone, Kentucky Route Zero is definitely a niche game that will work amazingly amazingly well for some, but be a little too out there for most. With that said, I would not discourage anyone from playing it, as at the very least, it is a very interesting game to talk about, and I've gotten a lot of enjoyment from both hearing why some people love it and also whinging about aspects of its story with others who found it underwhelming. And then I played the Dead Space remake, which I don't really have a ton to say about aside from that it's really good. It has been forever since I played Dead Space, so I didn't really notice all the ways that the remake is different, but while playing it, it felt the way I remember the game feeling back when I first tried it 15 years ago. I know that if I replayed the original, that wouldn't be the case, as the remake improved things in countless ways, but what matters is that they modernized it in a way that made it fun to play in current year without taking away what made Dead Space feel like Dead Space in the first place, which I think is a sign of a great remake. And while we're talking about games originally from the 2000s, I also replayed Assassin's Creed 2, which was an interesting experience and one I will be talking about in my next video for the main channel. I won't get too much into what I'll talk about there, but AC2 is a massively important game in that it influenced the direction of open world titles immensely, for better and for worse. I truly think it is one of the most consequential titles of the past 20 years, and as its consequences have been fully realized, I've definitely soured on it a fair bit, as I don't love the direction it helped push the industry. With that said, I did find some enjoyment in it. Like, I forgot how cool Ezio is. I didn't replay Brotherhood or try Revelations, but I was tempted to just to see his story. He is certainly not my favorite video game protagonist of all time, but he is up there as he has a ton of charm to him. But yeah, more thoughts on this will be on the main channel soon. For those counting, that is 6 games so far that I beat in February, which is actually only just past the halfway point. I may have gone a bit too hard last month. The next game I played was Kena Bridge of Spirits, and I don't really know how to fully explain it, but dang, do I just really love this game. It uses its core mechanics in clever ways for platforming, puzzle solving, and combat. Every ability has many uses, and while many of its mechanics are simple, they are also used rather effectively. But beyond that, there's just something about the art style and storytelling that I found incredibly moving. It was a world I loved playing in and learning about, and I don't know that that kind of connection can be made from just looking at gameplay footage. I remember hearing a lot of hype for this game before release due to its art style being so impressive, but despite it reviewing pretty well, it seemed to fall off the map completely when it actually came out, which is a bummer, as I think there is a lot about the game that is worth talking about both in terms of its themes and gameplay mechanics. I definitely say it's worth a look for anyone who likes fairly open action adventure games. The title I played after Kena had an equally impressive although very different art style, that being Hi-Fi Rush. This game has been hyped up so much due to its shadow drop and core gimmick, and you know, I can't blame anyone who has hyped it up for these reasons. It's really cool. I don't play a lot of character action games, so I don't really know how it stacks up to others, but I think part of why I enjoyed it so much is that as every attack is timed to the music, it made it way easier for me to pull off combos. The limitation of executing inputs on the beat sounds like it will make things more difficult, but I think it just gave a really good frame that helped prime me for success, which is great because for the few character action games I have played, I normally feel like garbage at them. The game looks and feels like a Saturday morning cartoon, and while it isn't revolutionary by any means, it is an extremely solid title that succeeds at pretty much everything it tries to do. If you think you'd like it, you'll probably like it. Once I beat Hi-Fi Rush, I jumped into the Case of the Golden Idol, and gosh dang if this isn't my kind of video game. It is a puzzler reminiscent in some ways to Return of the Obra Dinn, where you are shown a single moment just after a character's death and must examine the scene to figure out what exactly happened. I don't want to show too much footage or talk about it in depth all that much, as I think it is in the category of game where the less you know, the better, but while I don't think that it hits the same heights as something like Obra Dinn, there are definitely many aha moments that made my brain explode with excitement. Where Maquette's puzzles left me underwhelmed, many of the ones in the Case of the Golden Idol felt rewarding to figure out. It is a special little game, and I hope to keep seeing more stuff like it, as these sorts of puzzle games have proven to be some of my favorite titles in recent memory. After that, I played through Sable, which is a game that has been on my radar since release, but anytime I saw gameplay of it, it made me not all that interested in playing it for myself. Something about how the gameplay looked just didn't appeal to me, but I'm glad to say that I was being stupid and should have played it sooner. The most obvious inspiration for Sable is Breath of the Wild, and while being inspired by Breath of the Wild is pretty commonplace in today's gaming landscape, it is one of the few titles that I feel truly understands what makes Breath of the Wild so enjoyable, and that mostly comes down to its general structure as well as its use of space. The main goal is for Sable, the protagonist, to explore the world in order to discover what her path in life should be, but instead of this being done through some sort of quest line with a set story, it is done through the activities you choose to engage with. As you explore explore the world and help various people, you earn different masks that represent professions and ways of life Sable could choose. This makes everything you do feel important to the journey because in some way it is informing the person your version of Sable will become. A handful of hours into the game, I had gotten a few masks and was given the option to essentially end the story, but I didn't feel like I had figured out what was right for Sable yet, and I went on to play for another 10 hours before I did. And I think that's really cool. I felt truly in control of the pace of the story, which is pretty rare in video games. This structure mixed with a world rife with breathtaking landmarks and an intriguing history makes it an easy recommendation for those who like exploration games that give you some actual freedom. I will say though that I had some issues with how the game ran. Like I encountered way more glitches while playing it than I normally do with games, the worst of which were audio-based ones that kind of disrupted some of the chill vibes of traversing the sands. I played it on PC, so it is possible that it is more stable on console, as that seems to be the case pretty often these days. With that said, I found the core gameplay to be so enjoyable that I was more than happy to play through the bugs I encountered, but I know not everyone will be, so just take that into consideration. Oh, also, the soundtrack is absolutely incredible, and I've been listening to a handful of tracks in it on repeat since finishing the game. Very good. And speaking of banger soundtracks, that brings me to the final game I played in February. Everhood. Over the past decade, there's been a rise in Earthbound-inspired RPGs, obviously Undertale being the most notable of which. And I think one of the more interesting things about Everhood is that it is far more inspired by Undertale itself than it is by Earthbound. Two pretty notable features of Undertale are its incredible soundtrack and its intense bullet hell combat. And Everhood melds those two things together by combining the music and bullet hell aspects to make a rhythm game of sorts. And it's pretty rad. I won't talk much about it beyond that as I don't want to get too spoilery, but I also think it does some pretty interesting things with its narrative by building off some of the ideas that Undertale established with its story. While you definitely can play Everhood on its own and enjoy it, I do think that Undertale is sort of required reading to fully appreciate it, even though they aren't made by the same people or set in the same world or anything like that. But they do feel connected spiritually in a way. So yeah, check it out if you want, or don't, or maybe you have, I don't know. Just do whatever. Anyway, that's it for February. See you next month unless I decide not to do this again. Thanks, and bye.